Scripture today, to know thyself is the beginning of wisdom. Socrates. According to Socrates, true wisdom is knowing what you do not know. So an essential part of knowing yourself must be recognizing the limits of your own wisdom and understanding, knowing what you do genuinely know, and knowing what you have yet to learn. Vince Nene is a professor of philosophy at the University of Antwerp and senior research associate at the University of Cambridge. He is the author of Aesthetics as Philosophy of Perception. In an article pertaining to knowing thyself, Professor Nene asked, "Is your aim to accept yourself? Well, you need to know yourself for that first. Or is your aim to make good decisions, decisions that are right for you? Again, this would be difficult unless you knew yourself." The problem is that none of this logic is based on a realistic picture of the self and how we make decisions. This whole knowing thyself business is not as simple as it seems. In fact, it might be a serious philosophical muddle, not to say bad advice. Many of our impressions of ourselves are based strictly on past points of view, beliefs, and behaviors we develop throughout our lives. The author suspects that many of our choices are based on the assumption that I am just that kind of person. A few examples might be, I get my coffee at Starbucks, or I do not go to Costco. And of course, are you a beer or a wine person? We all have set ideas about what kind of people we are. Once we have decided these things, it is difficult to change. Most of the time, that is all for the best. We do not have to think too hard about most things. There is, however, a fundamental problem with this mental picture of ourselves. People change. There are tumultuous periods when we change drastically. In times of romantic love, say, or divorce or having children, often we are aware of these changes. After you have had kids, you probably notice that you suddenly become a morning person. But most changes happen gradually and under the radar. A few mechanisms of these changes are well understood, such as the mere exposure effect. The more you are exposed to something, the more you tend to like it or be like it. Another, more troubling one is that the more your desire for something is frustrated, the more you tend to dislike it or identify as not liking it. These changes happen gradually, often without us noticing anything. The problem is this: if we change while our self-image remains the same, then there will be a deep divide between who we are and who we think we are, or how we present ourselves. And this leads to internal conflict. To make things worse, we are exceptionally good at dismissing even the possibility that we might change. We all think that who we are now is the finished product. We will be the same in 5, 10, 20 years. But as psychologists have found, this is completely delusional. Our preferences and values will be very different in the not so distant future. Why is this such a big issue? It might be okay when it comes to ordering the espresso. Maybe you now slightly prefer cappuccino, but you think of yourself as an espresso kind of person, so you keep ordering espresso. So you are enjoying your morning drink a little bit less, not such a big deal. But what is true of espresso is true of other preferences and values in your life. Maybe you used to genuinely enjoy studying philosophy, but you no longer do. But as being a philosopher is such a set feature of your self-image, you keep doing it. There can be a huge difference between what you like and what you do. What you do is sometimes dictated by what kind of person you think you are, and not by what you actually enjoy. The real harm of this situation is not only that you spend much of your time doing something that you do not particularly like and often positively dislike. Instead, it is that the human mind does not like blatant contradictions of this kind. It does its best to hide this contradiction, a phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance. Ignoring a contradiction between what we like and what we do means we have to negate one position by some means. This internal disagreement or dissonance creates discomfort, and we seek a way to bring reconciliation. Our solutions may be faulty and lead us to an unsteady peace. It takes significant mental effort to rationalize or find evidence to support one value or to remodel them to seem more alike. And this leaves little energy to do anything else. And if you have little mental energy left, it is so much more difficult to switch off the TV or to resist spending half an hour looking at Facebook or Instagram. Know thyself. If we take the importance of change in our lives seriously, this really isn't an option. You might be able to know what you think of yourself in this moment, but what you think of yourself is very different from who you are and what you like. And in a couple of days or weeks, all of this might change anyway. Are there times when we might pretend to be who we are not? Everyone in our family or your group of friends might love to cook or love to hunt or do crossword puzzles. We assume or pretend we like these same things because our family or friends do. Knowing thyself is an obstacle to acknowledging and making peace with constantly changing values. If you know thyself to be such and such a kind of person, this limits your freedom considerably. You might have been the one who chose to be an espresso person or a donating to charity person. But once these features are built into your self-image, you have very little say in what direction your life is going. Any change would be either self-censored or lead to internal conflict. When do we know that something is not working in our life? Or when do we know it is time for a change? Thomas Boswell, a sports writer for the Washington Post, recently retired after 52 years. He was explaining his decision to retire. He used as an example a scene from the movie, The Man with Two Brains. Steve Martin is staring at a picture of his deceased wife and asking her about a woman he has fallen in love with. He says, "Becca, if there's anything wrong with my feeling for Dolores, just give me a sign." A whole house shakes. Objects fly around the room as if blown by an invisible wind. And the larger-than-life portrait of Becca spins in circles on the wall as a woman's voice shrieks over and over, "No, no, no, no." When it all stops, Martin, covered with debris, his hair blown in all directions, says matter-of-factly to the portrait, "Just any kind of sign. I'll keep on the lookout for it." In your life, how many pictures are spinning on the wall? Thomas Boswell, the sports writer, finally admitted to himself that after 52 years at the Washington Post, his energy level did not allow him to continue producing the high quality of work demanded of himself and still leave the time and energy he needs for the other things he wants to do in his life. He was changing. He needed to change some things in his life. He could not deny it anymore. We all have aspects of our lives that are not optimal. We all have habitual ways of doing things and viewing the world. Our non-productive behaviors or ways of thinking or being in relationships are usually obvious, and we know it would be advantageous to change them. And then there are times in our lives we act just like Steve Martin in the movie scene. Everything in our experience may point to a need for a change, and yet we continue our same habitual patterns. The question is how we recognize a situation for what it is and make the necessary changes. Assume we feel that something in our life is not working. What is our process for creating change in our lives? Every faith and or religion has a vision or an ideal of the perfect state of mind, a personal peace that when attained relieves one of the worries and frustrations we experience. The path to this desired state of mind or state of being is expressed in the sacred literature of all faiths. Reading and studying a religion gives one an historical account and insight into the theology and philosophy of the individuals who developed and documented that particular faith. Studying and repeating the literature of a faith can be completed in the same way one might copy another's homework. You saw the material, did enough to have an idea what the teacher wanted, but because you borrowed the homework, you really do not have a working knowledge of the subject. There's no substitute to doing your own homework. It does not matter which faith you practice, or how great a teacher you have found, or what a great library you have collected. You must do the personal soul searching homework yourself. The work is not someone else's interpretation of their story or their interpretation of sacred literature. There comes a time when you must apply all your learning to your life day by day on a very personal basis. Each of us forms our own understanding of our place in the world in relation to other humans. We also form an understanding of our relationship with spirit, with higher consciousness, with God. We all have individual stumbling blocks that create worry and stress in our lives. It may be our relationship with a family member. It may be the way we view our accomplishments. We might have a temper, or we might not feel comfortable expressing our point of view. Situations in your life that reduce your willingness to accept new information or to be honest with yourself restrict your spiritual growth. The blocks that restrict your peace of mind or your confidence, that is the place that you need to do more of your own homework. That is the picture of Becca spinning on the wall. When we are at the place that we are ready to do our own homework, writing out our thoughts and emotions can be a very effective way to clarify the way that you see life. Nobody else had your relationship with your mother or your father. Nobody else was in your body through elementary school, middle school, and high school. You are the only one who can recall all those emotions and the beliefs that you developed over a lifetime. As an adult with life experiences, you can express your emotions and beliefs in a private setting, allowing you to view yourself from your adult point of view. Why is it important to write our thoughts? Many times I had an idea that I thought was great. It might have been a business idea, a solution to a problem, or any number of things. Writing the idea on paper, the strengths and the weaknesses of the logic became apparent. When working with groups in meditation, the participants say journaling after meditations is invaluable. Many times, individuals end up documenting new insights out of thin air and not what necessarily occurred during the meditation. Directing our attention and desire to an issue and then allowing a free flow of thought allows our own original divine thoughts to materialize. A few weeks ago, I saw a documentary on Amy Tan, the author of The Joy Luck Club, among many other best-selling novels. This is a paraphrased segment from Ms. Tan's from the documentary, of Ms. Tan's from the documentary. My childhood, with its topsy-turvy emotions, has in fact been a reason to write. I can lay out squarely on the page and see what it was. I can understand it and see the patterns I went through. In each story, we are untangling a knot in a huge matted mess. The work of undoing the knots one at a time is the most gratifying part of writing. But the mess will always be there. Spontaneous epiphanies always leave me convinced once again that there's no greater meaning to my life than what happens when I write. It gives me awareness so sharp that it punctures all layers of thought so that I can rise. That is what it feels like, a weightless rising to a view high enough to survey the moment of the past that led us to this one. Too soon the feeling dissipates, and I am hanging on to contrails as I come back down to a normal state of mind. Has my imagination worked this way since birth? When did I start noticing that one thing is emotionally like another? When did emotion and imagery start colluding? Whatever imagination is, I am grateful to its elasticity and willingness to accommodate whatever comes along, for giving me flotillas of imagery circumnavigating a brain that finds emotional resonance in almost anything. I just have to let go of self-consciousness for it to spill out freely, as if all I was doing was listening to music. The documentary on Amy Tan revealed generations of pain and dysfunction in her family and her life. At the same time, the documentary revealed the beauty and wisdom that Miss Tan learned from examining her life, listening to her mother's story, and writing about it. When Miss Tan referred to her difficult relationship with her mother, she said, "Hope is never hopeless. Hope is love of life." And I think that was something my mother and I both understood. When we read books and watch movies that stir something inside of us, emotions of empathy, fear, courage, and laughter are triggered by movies, books, most everything we do. Triggering these emotions is an effort to understand ourselves. When we are watching movies and reading books, we put ourselves into the situations in the storyline. There's a way to try on that feeling or emotion borrowed from someone else. Knowing thyself is a lifelong quest. The self continues to evolve with life experience. I don't believe there's any substitute for personally documenting your own thoughts and studying your own emotional and spiritual reactions to your own beliefs. A quote from the filmmaker James Redford, the son of Robert Redford, who produced the documentary on Amy Tan. I feel it reflects how each of us can view and examine our own lives. He said, "It is the best possible use of my time as a filmmaker to take stories around complex issues and render them relatable and understandable, and God forbid, entertaining in a way that gives people hope." End of quote. Each one of us has a story to tell. Understanding our story allows us to get past the emotions and the blocks triggered by our own story. This allows us to put our story in perspective. In the words of James Redford, make our story relatable and understandable. And I will add, understandable to our most important audience, ourselves. Knowing thyself is a journey. Who do you think you are? Who do you feel you are? And by far most importantly, who do you want to be? May each of us do our own homework and strive to make our stories of our true selves understood and relatable, not only to ourselves, but to friends and others that could benefit from our experiences. Blessings.